I'll just get right into it. So today I'm going to talk about human flourishing. It's something that I've been working on and thinking about for a long time, but maybe I never really articulated it as such until a couple of months ago. But I came across flourishing as a concept, as an ethos, and I thought that's such a great way to frame the work that I do. So a little bit about myself. I have five kids. The youngest is 5, the oldest is 13. You don't hear any kids in the background now because they're all at football practice. Um, I I started my career in management consulting, and you know, very soon I kind of saw through management consulting, and I didn't want to spend my career writing PowerPoint decks. I wanted to look for something more meaningful. So I became an entrepreneur. Um, you might have heard of a frozen yogurt brand called Frolic back in the day. So that was my first business. But anyway, um, I started angel investing in tech startups in 2011. And it is through this work that I actually got into education because I was hanging out with all these founders, many of whom have tech background. And so I decided to start a coding school for kids back in 2012. So I think Saturday Kids is probably the first coding school for kids in Singapore. Um, and uh, it took us a long time, maybe 4 or 5 years before uh, coding for kids became a thing. Um, but as soon as it became a thing, it became another thing that all kids had to do, right? It became another form of tuition, which really wasn't why I started Saturday Kids. So even though it's a coding school, I tell people it's a curiosity school disguised as a coding school because parents will pay for coding, they won't pay for curiosity. But really, what we do at Saturday Kids is to find means and ways to help kids keep that innate curiosity that they have, right? Every child is born with it, but they lose it along the way. Um, so one of the things that Saturday Kids did back in 2019 before COVID is we ran this thing called Saturday Kids Unplugged, which is a nature-based camp that we run out of Karizawa, Japan. And that was phenomenal. The kids had a lot of fun. And obviously because of COVID, we couldn't run it for a few years. But we just restarted Saturday Kids Unplugged Karizawa last June. And then we did an autumn edition in October, and we'll be running again this year. So the whole point is that I want kids to be in nature. I want kids to learn from nature, to to play with whatever is in their environment. And when we first ran it in 2019, we were a bit unsure how kids would take to it. So we only did it for 3 days. But then after 3 days, all the kids were like, "Oh, why is it only 3 days? Can we have another 2 days?" So then we extended it to 5 days. And I always tell people that the happiest Singaporean kids I've ever met are the ones who attended the camp in Karizawa, because what's there not to like, right? It's just running around, playing in the creek, hiking to the waterfall, doing the high ropes course. So yeah, I would say that Saturday Kids Unplugged is probably the best thing I've done in the 12 years of running Saturday Kids. Um, I heard about the Obama leadership program in 2019. So someone told me about it. I put in an application and I became one of the first Obama leaders in Asia Pacific. So the Obama Foundation runs a leadership program. And I guess the way they select leaders is by um, identifying young people who uh, who work for a cause, right? So it doesn't matter what that cause is. It could be healthcare, it could be um I don't know, LGBTQ equality issues, it could be education. But I met a bunch of really inspiring people through this leadership program. Um, and then I also spun out a new entity called Doyobi, which is really focused on the same skills that the kids were learning in Karizawa at Saturday Kids Unplugged. But obviously, not every child has the opportunity to travel to Japan, right? So the idea is how do we use a virtual environment to get kids to learn what I feel are essential skills, right? Some people call it soft skills or life skills or 21st century skills. But essentially, how do we help kids to become critical thinkers, to become effective communicators, to be confident young people? That's really what Doyobi is about. So I started writing a newsletter about a year and a half ago, um, and I pretty much publish it weekly. So this is one of the first few pieces I wrote about what I wish I knew. And I think a lot of the work that I do really revolves around these ideas, right? How do we learn about ourselves? How do we learn about the world? How do we learn skills and not just content? Um, how do we believe in our own potential? So whether it's through Saturday Kids or through Doyobi, I really try to help kids think about these things, right? And I think with five kids, four of whom are in the MOE system, I have a pretty good idea of, what they're being taught in school, and it certainly isn't this stuff, right? And I just feel like this is much, much more meaningful and important for young people to know than whatever content they learn about chemistry or physics or math. Um, so why do I do what I do? I guess in short, it's because I believe in human flourishing. I believe in doing meaningful work. I think from a fairly young age, maybe when I was still in secondary school, I already felt that I didn't want to work for a salary because what's the meaning behind that, right? Like you're just working for a paycheck. Um, and therefore I always felt that I was going to be an entrepreneur. So that's one thing I remember about growing up. The second thing I remember about growing up is constantly asking myself, why am I learning this in school? How is this useful or important or relevant? So I was constantly bored. I mean, I went to pretty good schools, but I was never a great student. I was a pretty average student in, some of the top schools. And I think that even till today, kids are still learning the same way that we were learning when we were kids, right? It's all sort of subject based. There's very little inquiry, very little interdisciplinary learning or transdisciplinary learning. Or actually, to sum it up, right, it's not connected to the real world, right? And I feel like that's really what is missing in mainstream education today. That is so far apart from what really happens in the real world. And actually, a veteran educator said this to me a couple of weeks ago. He said most teachers go straight from university to teacher college and then back to school, right? They have never been in the real world before, right? So how are they supposed to help prepare young people for this world that they have no experience of? And I thought, that's really, really true, right? Like most teachers really have never worked um outside of the outside of schools, right? So um that's why today with Doyobi, I try to help schools. I try to convince principals that it's really important for young people to have the right mindset and the right skill set before they get out into the real world. But that's a very, very tough sell because whether it's in Singapore or actually in most countries, right, it's so much about standardized tests. So yeah, I guess another reason I do the work that I do is because I think that there's hidden potential in everybody, right? I don't know whether you can see with my, yeah. So I just finished reading the book by Adam Grant, Hidden Potential. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it. Actually, I have a slide on it later, so let me get to that. So how did I get started? Yeah, like I said, I was investing in early stage tech startups, and when I look at these founders, I realized that, well, nothing that they learned in school prepared them to be founders or prepared them to start their own business, right? So fundamentally, I don't think that schools are equipping young people with the skills to make their way in the world. Um, and just as importantly, schools are not helping young people to learn about the world and learn about themselves. Um, so if you see that screenshot on this slide, I don't know whether you can read it, but it says, I could tell you I got a 40 in my IB diploma, or I could tell you how my Mandarin fluency helped me find refuge for my family in the mountains of rural China. So this is taken from the website of Global Citizenship Diploma. And I just came across this diploma program at an education conference last month, and I thought, that's such a great way to frame education, right? It is not about the number or alphabet in your transcript. It is about what you are able to do and how you're able to help other people, help your community, or make a meaningful contribution to the world. So yeah, I think that is the sort of mindset that is really, really lacking in mainstream education. And I think that without that sort of mindset, it is very difficult to talk about human flourishing, because then flourishing just revolves around success, right? However it's defined. And in the, I guess, Singapore context, success is, a good job that pays well, that has some uh level of status, but it's very self-centered, right? It's all about, me and my family. But I guess if you look around you, you will know many people, friends and family who are deeply unhappy, right? Even though they may be, in very senior positions at a bank or at a law firm. And that is not flourishing, right? Like if you are flourishing, you will not be deeply unhappy. So that's really sort of the essence of what I'm trying to do, which is to help people identify what it is that they find meaningful, right? And usually if they can ask themselves that question, it's very rare that, somebody will say, I find, making as much money as possible meaningful, right? Maybe they will say, I find making as much money as possible now so that I can give it all away later to be meaningful, right? But it's really about, that number. Um, so yeah, how do we get young people to think like that? So this slide is just about what it means to flourish. I think I've already spoken about it. I think one thing that I'll highlight here on this slide is intellectual growth, right? So I think in Singapore, government always talks about lifelong learning, which I find a bit ironic because it's precisely the way kids are taught in school that kills their love for learning, right? And then they try to, tell adults that, hey, you should have this passion to learn. But I also believe that in order to flourish, you need to keep growing as a person. And one of the best ways to do that is by reading more, right? By learning about new technologies, about the world. And speaking of technologies, I also recently came across this concept called human technologies. Maybe later I'll just share the slide deck with you and do a screen share. But I found this idea really fascinating that everything is a technology, right? Even speech is a technology. It's a way to communicate. So the person who came up with this idea, his name is Toby Newton. He's the principal of ICHK, which is an international school in Hong Kong. And this idea of human technologies really resonated with me because for a long time I've struggled with how do we um, call these skills or mindsets that we feel are so important, like resilience or critical thinking or creativity. And then, when I came across human technologies, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what this is about, right? How do we keep evolving our own abilities as human beings, right? Um, let me share a bit more about that later. Um, this photo here, I don't know whether you recognize the two young men wearing the Glints t-shirts, but they are the founders of Glints. They dropped out of Stanford. No, they dropped out of Berkeley and one other school, I can't remember now. Oh, UPenn. Um, to work on Glints, right? And they never look back. And the point I'm trying to make here is that there are so many possibilities for young people, but then, especially in Singapore, many young people are conditioned um, to stick to this narrow path because they have been told by society, by teachers, by parents that they need to go to university and get a well-paying job. And it's typically some white collar profession, whether it's banking or law or medicine. But then we never really ask young people, what is it you want, right? And they themselves don't know what they want until they learn more about themselves. So it's sort of like a vicious cycle where young people, they just go along with whatever they've been told because they have no idea what is it that is really meaningful to them. So I guess my advice would be, go try different things, get out of your comfort zone, explore the world. The more you learn about yourself and the more you learn about the world, the easier it is to figure out what it is you find meaningful. So I think this is the last slide. Um, what do young people need to get there, right? To find meaning and to flourish. And this is just a summary of the Adam Grant book that I just read, and I posted this on my LinkedIn. Um, but I think a lot of these key points that he mentioned in the book really resonate with me. So how do you get out of your comfort zone, right? For example, he used learning a new language as an example, right? So the best way to learn a language is by making 200 mistakes a day. If you can make 200 mistakes a day, within 3 months, you'll be fluent in the language, right? And that's how kids learn, right? That's how they learn to speak. Um, Becoming a sponge, right? So trying to learn as much as possible, whether it's knowledge or skills or um, different perspectives. Not striving for excellence, but striving for progress. Turning practice into play. I think that this one is sort of how I think about education as well, right? That kids really just want to have fun. So how do we make learning fun for them, right? How do we um, offer sort of play-based learning and help them retain that motivation and desire to learn? Because all kids, they want to learn. It's just that the way the system is designed makes it such that they have very little interest in learning. So yeah, how do we make play like a core part of how learning takes place? So anyway, I recommend the book. Please go check it out. Um, and yeah, this one line from Natalie Portman, I think also really resonates because achievement is great if you know why you are working towards something, right? But I think many young people never stop to question why am I spending, 7 years getting a degree in medicine, right? When I have no interest in becoming a doctor, or when I know deep down this is not what I want to do. So if what I just said resonated with you, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter as well, like I mentioned. Oh, and also Instagram. It's the same handle, the real John Tan, because there are about 1,000 of us in Singapore. So I'll pause here. Any questions? How to make money legally but easy for a 14-year-old? Um, so my daughter, she's 11, her name is Summer. She has one party trick. She makes really good tiramisu. So I always find opportunities for her to sell her tiramisu. Um, and it just happens that I have, a lot of friends who are in F&B. So and I'm also I'm a big wine drinker, natural wine. So whenever I throw one of my, salad rate parties, I would ask her to make tiramisu. And it's not just the making of it, right? It is, you have to go figure out how much your ingredients cost. You have to go hustle at the event to get people to buy your tiramisu. They're not just automatically gonna, pay for it, right? So it may not sound like much, but because she does it, every 3 months or 6 months, it's sort of like second nature to her now, and she gets her siblings to help out, right? And then she has to figure out how to share the profits with the siblings. So the siblings are at the event, hustling, walking around with a sign, buy my tiramisu. Um, so that's a really easy thing to do. It's sort of like a lemonade stand. But I think the important point is to let kids learn about the concept of money and show them an easy way that they can earn it themselves, right? Another project that we did during COVID, and this was for Cheryl's carnival, is she did this children's entrepreneurship fair, and I got my kids to use Mid-Journey, so generative AI, to create sticker packs, right? So then they had to learn how to, keep improving their prompts to get the images they want. And then we turned it into a sticker collection, which they sold at the carnival. And again, all profits go to them, right? I just underwrite the cost. But it's these sort of little things that, just get the kids to think about, money as a concept and how they can make their own.
Okay, yes. I like what you've been saying quite a bit. In fact, my wife and I, we've been listening in, and yeah, a lot of things that you say resonate with us. Yeah, so but some of these things don't exactly pay a lot of money. So I mean, I'm speaking as a founder of my own company as well. Yeah, I mean, I have been struggling with getting the money going. At the same time, I do believe in what I do in terms of working for inclusivity in the special needs community and so on and so forth. But it's not always that easy to get finances. So how do you actually reconcile that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what sort of entrepreneurship you're referring to, right? Because maybe you're running a social enterprise. In my world, in the tech world, I guess there is some degree of longer term sort of taking a longer term view of things, right? So you you work for the payoff at the end if it works, right? So I guess in order to pursue entrepreneurship, it's very hard to have your cake and eat it too, right? And actually, as an investor, um, that's one thing that kind of turns me off when startup founders, especially older founders, actually, I've noticed, when they say, hey, I want to leave banking and build this fintech startup, right? I have this great idea, but I used to be paid $20,000 a month at the bank, so yeah, I want to raise money so that I can pay myself $20,000 and build this company, right? And I don't think that's realistic because you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? Like there must be some degree of personal sacrifices in order to pursue what you want to do, right? Like I don't want to be the person funding you to quit the job that you hate so that you can be an entrepreneur and still pay yourself the same amount of money, right? I'm not sure I'm directly answering your question because your context could be very different. But I guess one more thing that I can add is that um, I've not been paying myself a lot for many, many years, right? So um, there is also an opportunity cost for me to keep doing this work that I do. But I do it because I believe in it, right? I believe that there is a better way for kids to learn. I believe that, mainstream education is uh way behind where the world is. But yeah, I guess if I have to summarize, it is that it is very difficult to pursue meaning without some degree of personal sacrifice. So Chris has a question about being a Solidity blockchain programmer, whether that's a possible job. Um, I mean, I can't answer that simply because technology is changing so fast, right? One of the books that I'm reading now, again, I don't know whether you can see it. It's called The Coming Wave. So it's basically about AI and synthetic biology. It's founded by it's written by one of the founders of DeepMind, which Google acquired a few years ago. So I guess I am mentioning that because technology is evolving so fast, right? That it's really hard for anyone to make a call to say, hey, you should learn, Solidity or whatever, programming language, and you will have a career. I don't think it works that way. What criticism have you received while leading a company? Well, so last year I wrote a post on my LinkedIn profile about giving up on Singapore. And somebody actually took a screenshot of that and then posted it on Reddit, and it became like I don't know how many word thread. But basically I was viral on LinkedIn for a couple of days. And you know, unsurprisingly, I guess most of it was criticism, right? Like criticizing me for being idealistic, for uh trying to be different, for blaming the system for my own startups lack of success. And I'll say it here, and I know that this is going on YouTube, but I'll say it anyway. I think that Reddit thread really goes to show how narrow-minded most Singaporeans are and how myopic they are. That they think what got us here will get us there. That, if they are comfortable where they are today, their kids can follow the same path and be equally comfortable 20 years from now. Like that's just not realistic, right? And I am incredibly frustrated that so few parents can see that mainstream education is really doing very little to prepare young people to make their way in the world, right? To have the skill set and mindset to make meaningful contributions to the world. And I'm not talking about, becoming a social entrepreneur or starting a non-profit. I think that to make any sort of meaningful contribution to any organization in the next 10, 20, 30 years, you really do need a set of skills and abilities. And it's about what you can do, right? It's not about how well you did in school or what you learned in school. And, let's face it, right? Most of the things we learned in school, we really learned it for the test or the exam. As soon as it's over, we forget about it, right? So yeah, I just wish that more parents can be more enlightened. I need to choose my words carefully here, but um I guess that's really the crux of it, right? Like if you cannot see beyond the next 5 years, or if you believe that the next 5, 10, 15 years is going to be like what it is today, then I rest my case. Dawn has a question about specific skills besides the ones that I've mentioned to be a successful entrepreneur. I think resilience is probably the first one that comes to mind because entrepreneurship is so hard that I think the most successful founders I know um have that tenacity, right? Or that resilience to keep going at it and to keep working on the same problem for a long time, right? So my most well-known investment is probably Ninja Van. And that started 9 years ago, right? So people always think about overnight success, but Ninja Van, um, it took them 9 years. And before Ninja Van, they ran another uh startup for about 4 or 5 years that eventually failed, right? So it's been like a 15-year journey for these founders to build, Ninja Van to where it is now. So definitely resilience. I think the other thing is street smart, right? How do you define that? I don't know, but it's I think it's about um the ability to get things done, uh and being resourceful. Yeah, maybe resourcefulness is another way of putting it, right? How do you with very limited resources keep getting to the next milestone? And I think the best founders all have that ability, right? To be resourceful enough to, get to that next stage. And again, this is not something that kids learn in school, right? All they learn in school is how to study and, you know, learn exam techniques to ace an exam, right? But where's the resourcefulness in that, right? What do they really learn uh, when they learn these exam techniques? Do I think exams have a place in the education system at all? Yeah, I think so, right? I think assessment is always important. um the question is, what are you assessing? I think that's more fundamental. So I think somebody told me this. She said that the reason MOE gives for not reducing class size, right, to 24 or 30 from the current 40 kids in class. The reason they gave is because they said there's no evidence that smaller class size leads to better performance, right? Then I guess the question is, better performance in what sense? How are you measuring better performance, right? And obviously, they point to research studies that show that smaller class size don't lead to better test scores. So again, it's all about test scores, right? But what about that relationship between teacher and student, right? And how a smaller class size can help build more meaningful relationships, and that will help the young person. What about things that I just spoke about, right? Like resilience or resourcefulness. If teachers have more time with each student, they're better able to identify, what is it that is missing, in each student, and try to help to develop those skill sets or mindsets. Um, so yeah, to answer your question, I think, young people should be assessed, but we should assess them in a much more sort of whole person way, right? Rather than assessing them based on how well they can answer, exam questions.
Moonlake, she says, what makes you keep going? And
Ah,
yeah.
I think it was Obama who said this, I can't remember now. But it goes something along the lines of be the change you want to see, right? And I feel that um a more meaningful education is so fundamental to how the world is going to be. It's so fundamental to the kind of adults our kids grow up to become, that uh, I deeply believe in what I'm doing. But I guess to answer your question, I do question myself sometimes as well, right? I'm like, why am I doing this? I have 5 kids. I can focus on my 5 kids. I don't have to worry about, all these other kids, especially if the parents themselves don't care, right? Or if the parents, like those, who commented on the Reddit thread, are so complacent, or they are so um singularly focused on getting the best exam results for their kids, right? So why should I care so much? But I guess I feel that Singapore is in decline. We just don't see it yet. But the way the country operates, the way we think about things. Like I said, what got us here won't get us there. And I think it's really, really critical that our kids grow up, with the sort of, human technologies that will allow them to thrive, right? For this country to continue to thrive, we need young people coming out of formal education with a different mindset about what it is they should do or what is meaningful to the world. And again, it doesn't have to be in the non-profit space. It doesn't have to be, starting a charity. But I think technology, right, especially with AI, that's going to really replace a lot of current jobs. And there'll be many new jobs that will pop up in the next 5, 10, 20 years, which we don't know what those jobs look like, right? So all we can do is to equip young people with those skills to be adaptable and to be able to do those jobs, right, and work in those organizations. But how is our current education system preparing young people to work in those jobs? I just don't see it. I'm 10 years old. How would you advise me to be bold and courageous in my dreams? I don't know where to start. Well, I mean, the fact that you are tuning in and listening to me speak on a Saturday morning is a good start. Maybe one way is just to be inspired, right? And find inspiration from people who have done amazing things. And it's not limited to, tech founders, right? There are so many incredible people in the world. And the great thing about, the information age we live in is that, these stories are widely available, right? Or go to the library and pick out a memoir. Like I just read Shoe Dog, which was written by the Nike founder. Fantastic book. But there are so many examples. So just go read more, go talk to more people, and I guess speak to people who are not like your parents or who are not like your teachers, right? And just understand perspectives of different people. Maybe they don't live in Singapore, right? Maybe they don't speak like you and I. Maybe they don't look like you and I. But that's the whole point, right? That there are these amazing people all over the world, and Singapore is really a very, very small country. But sometimes because we are such a wealthy country, we feel like we are the center of the universe, but we are really just a little red dot. Okay, so how we designed the program at Doyobi is I went to these founders that I invested in, and I asked them, what do you hire for today, right? And obviously nobody said, oh, I hire for academic achievements. Everybody spoke about similar things, right? Like being adaptable, resilient, being great problem solvers, or team players. So then I went back to my team and I asked, how do we help a 10-year-old develop these skills? And what we realized, and that should have been obvious to us, right, is that the best way to learn these skills is by applying and practicing them, right? So you don't learn to be a critical thinker by hearing me talk about critical thinking, right, and explaining to you what critical thinking is, right? You may know the definition, doesn't mean that you are a critical thinker. You become a critical thinker by making decisions, right, and then reflecting on the consequences of those decisions. So we designed these online quests where we manufacture opportunities for kids to collaborate, for them to make decisions, for them to problem solve, for them to exercise creativity. And that's really what Doyobi is about. And alongside that, we also design each quest based on a theme, right? So the theme might be the ethics of AI. It might be something more current. So last year when there were all these articles written about how we were treating migrant workers in Singapore, we actually came up with a quest about migrant rights, right? So it's to help kids also learn about what's happening around them, right, in their community, and how to think about, um, what sort of rights migrants have, right? And maybe, there's no right or wrong answer, but just get them thinking about it, right? And then, debating amongst themselves. I think that's really valuable. So, that in a nutshell is what Doyobi is about. We were running it as a weekly program that parents sign up for up until December. We just stopped running the B2C program because there were so few signups. And again, it goes back to, I don't think it's about cost, right? It's not that expensive. It's not any more expensive than a regular tuition class. And again, it all goes back to the system, right? Because that's what the system tests for. So it's unfortunate, but yeah. So right now we work primarily with schools, both international schools and MOE schools. And then with schools, we actually work with the English department. So we use our quests and the quest activities to help young people kind of develop better reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills. But turns out that many MOE teachers are exactly like parents. So the question they ask us is, I can see that the kids are really enjoying it. They are much more engaged and motivated to learn. But how does this help their test score? So it's all about that, right? So yeah. Do I think it's possible to educate children using video games? Yeah, absolutely. I think video games are a great way for kids to learn. I think what I would say is that the game designer needs to be intentional about what the learning goals are. So for example, I'm actually an investor in a startup called Autodot, right? Started by two young female Singaporean founders. And Autodot uses Roblox to help kids learn science concepts, right? So yeah, I absolutely believe that video games can be used for education purposes, and I will argue that they can be a lot more effective than learning from a textbook, right? Because kids are much more engaged and interested in learning. But like I said, we need to be intentional about the learning outcomes. And shooter games teach kids math and science. I mean, I don't know specifically about shooter games, but yeah, go check out Autodot, right? They have a bunch of Roblox games that can help you learn science concepts.
How about the question from Brienne? Brienne is 13 years old and she asked, when you start a company, what are the mistakes you made and can I as a young person avoid that?
I'll share with you my own struggles, right, as a founder. And maybe you don't want to make the same mistakes that I've made, right? And that I continue to make every single day. So my mistake is that I'm trying to sell something that people don't want, right? Or they don't realize that they need. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do. And you compare that with Ninja Van, right? I think you would have heard of Ninja Van. And that is such an obvious problem to solve for, right? Everybody who buys something from the internet needs it delivered to their home, right? Every single e-commerce merchant out there needs a last mile logistics provider. And so Ninja Van never had to spend years in the wilderness trying to figure out if this is something that the world needs, right? And that's something that I've spent years doing, trying to figure out who cares for these skills or mindsets that I feel are so important, or who cares for these online adventures and quests that my team has built, right, which kids really enjoy, but then I can't offer them directly to kids, right? They are gatekeepers, whether it's parents or teachers or principals. I guess what I'm trying to say is that when you start a company, the easier way to do it is to solve an obvious pain point, right? But if you do something like what I'm doing, where there is no obvious pain point, it's very difficult, and I don't recommend it. While people are asked, I'll just share my screen again. So this is a primer on human technologies. I'll just keep quiet and let you read it for a couple of minutes. So I'll read this out. The curriculum must be rethought in the light of our current understanding of what it is to be human. We need to focus on how we can best educate young people to be resourceful, resilient, collaborative, open-minded, ethical, accepting of others, sustainable in their habits, and more inclined to take the long view. So I guess this also describes, the work that I do and why I do what I do, right? Because I really believe in everything that, Toby wrote here. And it's just a shame that our education system doesn't work like this. I guess to sum up, right, and maybe, again, look at this PDF in front of you. Toby wrote, in short, we need to educate students to have a profound and positive sense of the art and craft of being human. And I think that's really what this talk is about, human flourishing, right? How do we help our kids and our grandkids to flourish as human beings, to lead meaningful lives? And how do we equip them with, first of all, the mindset to think like that, and then the skills to be able to do meaningful work? There are no right answers, but I think there are wrong answers. I think believing that, our world-class education system will prepare our kids for the future, I think that's an obvious wrong answer. Believing that, there is this straight and narrow path that, young people in Singapore or, in developed countries should follow, I think that's a wrong answer. But I think the fact that you are on this call really shows that you think differently than most parents, right? Then it is up to you to spend the time to explore all the alternatives out there. And there are alternatives, right? Little U is an alternative. Kubro is an alternative. Unfortunately, national education is mandatory in Singapore, but you are allowed to homeschool your child. I think the 2 years that my eldest son spent out of school, I think really what he got out of those 2 years is, one, understanding that learning is meant to be a two-way process, it's interactive, and that you need to be an active participant in your own learning. And two, the time and space that he had to just explore different interests, which you just don't have the luxury of when you're in the system and you have, test after test after test. So yeah, I guess I'll stop here, and thank you everyone for your time.